वागीशाद्याः सुमनसः सर्वार्थानामुपक्रमे यं नत्वा कृतकृत्यास्यस्तन्नमामि गजाननं मालासुधाकुम्भविबोधमुद्रा विद्याविराजत्करवारिजाताम् अपारकारुण्यसुधाम्बुराशिं श्रीशारदाम्बां प्रणतोऽस्मि नित्यम् सत्यज्ञानसुखस्वरूपममलं क्षीराब्धिमध्यस्थितं योगारूढमतिप्रसन्नवदनं भूषा सहस्रोज्ज्वलं यक्षं चक्रपिनाकसाभयवरान् बिभ्राणमर्कच्छविं छत्रीभूतफणीन्द्रमिन्दुधवलं लक्ष्मीनृसिंहं भजे सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् शास्त्राब्धिपारदृश्वानं सङ्गहीनं तपोनिधिं भजे श्रीभारतीतीर्थगुरुं भद्रौघदायकम् श्रीमते शङ्करार्याय धीमतेऽद्भुतशक्तये नमोऽस्त्वद्वैतसिद्धान्तस्थापनोपात्तमूर्तये सन्ध्यारम्भविजृम्भितं श्रुतिशिरस्थानान्तराधिष्ठितं सप्रेमभ्रमराभिराममसकृत्सद्वासनाशोभितं भोगीन्द्राभरणं समस्तसुमनः पूज्यं गुणाविष्कृतं सेवे श्रीगिरिमल्लिकार्जुनमहालिङ्गं शिवालिङ्गितम् With namaskarams to the Padapadmas of Ubhay Jagadgurus and Sharadamba. In the beginning, there was a question that was asked. How many of you know Advaita? Please raise your hand. The fact of the matter is that in this gathering, there is only one person that should raise their hand, and that person is sitting behind me right now. So the philosophy of Advaita is as simple as it is complex. It is as easy as it is tough. It is as obvious as it is academic. So it is a very interesting philosophy that our Acharya Purushas have given us. And when we think of Bhagavad Pada, he did the service that he has done to us in terms of giving us Advaita through his Bhashya Granthas, through his Shastra Granthas, through his Stotras, through the Mathas that he established in the four directions of the country is incomparable. Which is why there is this one shloka that a Kavi named Narakanthirava Shastri has written in a text called Yatisarva Bhaumobhara. He highlights the salient points that Bhagavad Pada has given us. So he says, the Acharyas are very fond of this shloka. They tell it before several Anugraha Bhashanas, which is why I feel we should start with that. Yat Padambuja Chintanam Tanumatam Santana Shakhayate Bhashyam Yat Phanitam Chirantanagavi Hayyangavinayate Yasyajna Akhila Lokamoli Valabhi Malasu Malayate Tasmaye Shankaradeshikaya Namasam Sahasram Ashasmahe. He says we offer thousands upon thousands of namaskaras to Bhagavad Pada. Such should be our gratitude to him for giving us three things. The first thing is, a guru is to be worshipped. Right? We say, Yasya deve para bhakti yatha deve tatha guru. Right? The bhakti that we have towards a guru should be no different than the bhakti that we have towards Bhagavan. And they say that if we are able to do Acharyopasana that well, right? Also Bhagavan in Gita says Acharyopasanam Shaucham. Right? Worship or respect, reverence towards the Acharya is very important. So if we are able to carry that out properly, what Shastra says is, Tasyete kathitah yattah arthaha prakashante mahatmanam. Even things that the teacher has not even taught verbally will shine in the mind of the student. That is the power that the grace of the Guru has, that Guru Prasada has. Then we see this clearly in Bhagavad Pada's Charitra, because this is how he blessed Totakacharya. Totakacharya until then was a very normal student, but the second that Bhagavad Pada wished him to become adept at all Shastras, that was what happened. So the first thing that Bhagavad Pada gave us is a Guru Murti. So he gave us an Acharya that we can worship to get the grace of. Second, Bhashyam Yat Phanitam Chirantanagavi Hayyangavinayate. He whose Bhashya is like the butter that has been obtained from churning the milk of the Vedas, of the Upanishads. So the very important thing that we have received from Bhagavad Pada is, until then there were several philosophies. several philosophies stating different things in different ways. What Bhagavatpada did was he took the essence of all of those. He cut out anything that was not necessary or contradictory to Vedas. He took Vedas, he took the Purva Kanda, which dealt with karma. He took the Uttara Kanda, the ends of the Vedas, which talked about jnana, and he combined these two to give us a proper way of leading our life and a proper way of conducting sadhana, thereby allowing us to fulfill our lives. And he did this through his granthas, through his texts. His Brahmasutra Bhashya is perhaps the greatest philosophical text ever written. That aside, he has given us several other introductory texts to Vedanta, like Tattvabodha, Atmabodha, Dashashloki, Shatashloki, all of these. And on top of that, he has given us some Shastra Granthas, right? Not Vada Granthas, but Shastra Granthas, the Prasthanatrayi Bhashyas, right? The Sanatsujatiya Bhashya, Vishnu Sahasranama Bhashya, he has given us these. And also for everyone to read, even if they are not particularly interested in learning Vedanta, he has given us Stotra Granthas, the Sharada Bhujanga Stotram that we tell here every day to Devi, right? The Ganesha Pancharatna, Mudakaratma Modakam, all of these stotras that we tell so frequently that we think of every time we wish to worship Bhagavan are all things that Bhagavatpada has gifted us. So we owe him an enormous debt in terms of the literature he has given us. So he has given us just his very self as a Guru Murti for us to worship. Second, he has given us a vast corpus of literature for us to study and learn from. The third thing he did was, as an acharya, as a guru, as someone with the power and the responsibility to command and direct us in our ways of life. Yasya ajna akhila loka mauli valabhi malasu malayate. He whose commands, he whose orders, he whose directives are taken atop the head by every single astika. So that is another thing. The lifestyle that Bhagavad Pada told us to follow, right? The Panchayatana worship that he set in place, the Sarvadevata Aradhana that he set in place, right? The sequence of the Devatarchanas and all of that we do, the Matha Vyavastha that Bhagavad Pada set up, all the orders he gave us, those all are all to be taken with our head, Shirasa, right? We say, I will put this thing on my head when we say I'm taking this with the utmost respect. So that is the third thing that Bhagavad Pada has given us. He has given us himself as a Guru Murti to worship. He has given us profound literature for those seeking to wish to learn Vedanta or for those seeking to just immerse themselves in bhakti to worship Bhagavan. And third, he has laid out a lifestyle for us to lead. He has laid out a path for us to follow. He has laid out a means for us to do upasana, to do Vedanta Vichara, and to do karma as well. Right? So there is another saying, I do not know to what extent this is verified, but even the things that we ask for in the Sankalpa, where we say Mamapata Samasta Durtakshayadvara, even that was initiated by Bhagavad Pada, is what I have heard some elders say. So we have in front of us an Acharya Purusha of such lofty standards who has been giving anugraha to us to this day. So it is that Acharya that consolidated Advaita. A very common misconception is that Bhagavad Pada started Advaita. That is not quite true. Because even if we look at it as per the textual evidence, right? Bhagavad Pada wrote commentaries on the 10 Upanishads. Among those Upanishads is Mandukya. Uh, Along with the Mandukya Upanishad, there is another text called the Mandukya Karikas. So there are shlokas explaining the Mandukya Upanishad is quite short, not even 20 shlokas and 20 verses. And then there are some shlokas that are explaining that written by Gaudapada Acharya. They are called the Gaudapada Karikas. So Bhagavad Pada, along with the Mandukya Upanishad, has also written Bhashya for the Mandukya Karikas. So obviously, that is actually where, if you look at the books that Sringeri publishes, right, we have the photo of Devi, and you'll see a logo. Maya Matramidam Dvaitam is the first half, but you will see Advaitam Paramarthataha. This is the line that Sringeri puts on all the Bharati Tirtha Granthamala that it prints up. Right? So Maya Matramidam Dvaitam. Dvaita is brought upon by Maya, that is how we transact in the world, but the ultimate reality is Advaita. This is a statement from Gaudapadacharya's Karikas, from the Mandukya Karikas. So Gaudapadacharya is Bhagavad Pada's Guru's Guru. Even textually, Acharya wrote a commentary on Gaudapadacharya's text. So it is very clear that the way Advaita Siddhanta as such, named Advaita Siddhanta, was already in vogue before Bhagavad Pada. But what Bhagavad Pada did was he consolidated Advaita not just as the purport of the Vedas, but as the purport of everything that Sanatana Dharma has to offer. The Vedas, Puranas, Upanishads, Itihasas, Smritis. anything that the rishis had to give us in writing falls into the framework of this Advaita. That is the main upakara that Bhagavad Pada has done to us as Astikas. So it is that Acharya Purusha's text that we'll be talking about today, Shivananda Lahari. So, it was said that I should give an introduction to Advaita before we explore how Bhagavad Pada brought out Advaitic thoughts. So I will do that maybe in some 5-10 minutes before moving on to the subject matter. Advaita can be summed up in one sentence if need be. Advaita can be summed up in a whole library of books if need be. But a very simple line that is very commonly quoted is Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jiva Brahmaiva Naparaha is one sentence, one shloka. Another one that is very common is Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jiva Sakalam Jagatcha. So the philosophy is very simple. Brahman is the only thing that is Satya, and the Jagat is Mithya. The Jiva is Brahman in his true nature. So, these are all technical terms. We'll, unwrap these further. So, first, what is Brahman? Right? The Vedas tell us Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Right? That is one definition. The other definition that Veda gives us is Yatova imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti samvishanti. So these are two definitions. You will see both of these come out in Shivananda Lahari later, but I'll just tell you shortly what they are. The first definition says that Brahman is nothing but Satya, Chaitanya, and here it says Ananta, but later you have Anando Brahmeti Vyajanan. So Sat, Chit, and Ananda are Brahman's forms. Brahman is that. Sat is existence. Note, it is not a qualified existence as in an object that is existing. Brahman is existence. It is an abstract concept. In the same way, Chit is Chaitanya, sentience, consciousness. Right? Not something that is conscious or something that is sentient, but sentience, consciousness is the word for it. In the same way, Ananda. Ananda is not, again, it is not the happiness that is born of the experience of something. Right? Most of our happiness is we see a good movie, we feel happy. We eat something nice, we feel happy. We listen to a nice song, that gives us happiness. The Ananda that we say to be Shuddha Brahman is not the happiness that is born of experiencing something. It is the happiness that is born, quite frankly, of actually not experiencing anything. It is more a tranquility, per se, than an active happiness. It is the state in which you feel you do not need anything more. So the contentment, right? The happiness that someone has, perhaps after a meal, is a good example. After you've had a good meal, you feel happy, you do not have any more hunger, you do not need any more. Hopefully you have not overeaten, so that is not a problem. You have had enough, and you do not desire anything more. You are happy with everything as is. So that is the Ananda, right? That is qualified as Brahman. So this is one definition of Brahman. So this is clearly a very abstract concept that is very hard for us to understand with a raw intellect. So taking this into mind, what we interact with every day is the Jagat, the cosmos, the universe, right? Everything that we see is always outside of us, generally. Our reactions are inside, but everything that we interact with lays outside of us. So what Veda then did was it redefined Brahman with respect to the world around us. So that from which everything is born, that due to which everything abides, and that into which everything merges again is Brahman. So it's a very simple concept, I guess, and also something I think is pretty universal even across faiths and religions. And when we conceive of a God type entity, right? So everything needs to originate from this, and everything needs to abide within it, and everything when it dissolves, notice it is not destroyed. When it dissolves, it goes back into the this entity, right? And it dissolves because there is no kind of, what science is, there is no, it's conservation of matter. There is no destruction of something that exists, and nothing is born out of nowhere, right? So this cosmos is expressed out of Brahman. That is a good way of putting it. It is expressed out of Brahman. It exists due to Brahman, and it dissolves back into Brahman. That is the way that Shastra puts it. So this is the nature of Brahman. Then we come to the Jagat. Another thing with Brahman is we call it Satya, right? Another aspect of Satya means it is Trikala Abhadita, right? There is no change in its nature in the past, present, or future. It is untouched by time. It is permanent, eternal, right? So we call this actually the Kutastha. It is a very beautiful word. So the kuta is it is a goldsmithing term in Sanskritam. So when the goldsmith is hammering metals, right, he will put them on a flat surface, and he will work a necklace into place, take off the necklace, put it elsewhere. Then he'll get earrings. He will work it on the same slab, put it elsewhere. Then he will get some kankana. He will work that and put it aside. Then he'll get a bracelet, work that, put it aside. So even though the ornaments are coming and going, that the foundation upon which the ornament rests does not change. In Sanskritam, that is called a kuta. So he's called the Kutastha Chaitanya because although the world may change, right, although the thoughts and emotions and all the changes that our inner world goes through changes, it is the Chaitanya within, right, the consciousness within that persists unchanged by whatever is going on the surface. So that is the nature of Brahman, in that it does not change past, present, and future. It is separate, distinct from the body, from the senses, from the mind. So that is Brahman. The second line that we have in this triangle between Brahman, Jiva, and the Jagat, right? This is the triangle that all philosophies have to deal with. The second portion we have of this is the Jagat. The Jagat is nothing but this cosmos, anything that was created. Literally that which is born, Jayate, it is born, and Gachati, it will go. That is why it is called the Jagat. Right? So this cosmos is called Mithya. Mithya is very erroneously translated as something that is false. That is not really the right word. English is a very unwieldy language to express these concepts. I think Swami Chinmayananda calls it is not unreal, it is not real, I think is the way he put it. I don't know if that made any more sense than the word Mithya, but we'll try to explain that a bit more. So what we mean by Mithya is, you cannot say it exists and you cannot say it does not exist. It is sad asad anirvachaniyam. Anirvachaniyam means it cannot be defined. Sat is something that is existent, asat is something that is non-existent. You cannot define it as either. It is not existent because you can see it pass away. It is not false because you clearly experience it. Advaita, in no point over the course of explaining its philosophy, denies the reality of this world. This world is very much a place that we have to live in, interact with, do our duty in, perform our responsibilities in. Right? There is at no point does Advaita tell us that the world is something that is not real, can be neglected and shirked. The world is real, it is not absolutely real, is the point. Because there is nothing in this world that is permanent. That is the simple point right there. If you look at a chair, there is a date at which that chair did not exist. There will be a date where that chair does not exist. Even something as permanent as the Grand Canyon, there was a time when it did not exist, and there will be a time when it will not exist. And even something as immovable as the Himalayas, there was a time when it did not exist, and apparently, thanks to global warming, we're losing 2 inches of the Himalayas every year. So at some point, several thousands of years later, that will also have to go. Right? So there is nothing in the world that is permanent, and therefore it cannot be completely true. It cannot become absolutely real. So this middling state in which something that is not absolutely real but not absolutely false is called mithya. The most common two examples that we are given to illustrate this concept of mithya is a dream and the rope snake. Right? So in a dream, at the time that we are having the dream, no one is aware that they are dreaming. When we are in a dream, for us that dream is real. If there is a tiger chasing us in the dream, we run as fast as our dream legs allow us to. Right? If there are dream laddus, we will eat as many dream laddus as our dream mouth allows us to. Right? There is at no point are we aware that we are in a dream. When at the time of its experience, the dream is real to us. The second you wake up, you understand that the dream is not something that is real, that it was all concocted. Right? So you cannot say that the dream never existed, but neither can you say that the dream was something that was real. Right? It is in that gray area that cannot be defined. In the same way, we give the example of the rope and the snake. Right? It is dark outside, you walk outside, there is actually a rope there, but because of the darkness, you think it is a snake. Right? And then after a while, you shout, you scream, you shriek, you do something that gets someone else's attention. They come and they shine a flashlight on the rope, and then you see it is not a snake; it is a rope. Right? So until then, you saw a snake. Everyone that came by, you said there is a snake outside my house. You may even have taken a picture of the snake and posted it to WhatsApp. Until that point, you thought it was a snake. Right? But the second that the light turns on, you see it is a rope. Where did the snake go? Right? That is the number one question that Vedanta asks. Where did the snake go? The answer is the snake was understood to be the rope. The snake did not go anywhere. Your understanding of the snake changed to realize that it is not a snake in nature, it is actually a rope. The same principle is applied to the Jagat. The Jagat is not actually the Jagat as we understand it right now, but it is actually Brahman in its true nature. There is another beautiful point that is brought out when we take this rope snake example. Right? We also ask the question then, if everything in this cosmos is mithya, right? It is not absolutely real, then the words of the Guru are also mithya, Vedas are also mithya, Shastras are also mithya, Upanishads are also mithya, right? How can something that is not absolutely real lead us to something that is absolutely real? Right? This is a very obvious question that we can ask, right? If you want to warm something up, you put it on fire, you don't put it on ice. Right? If you want something to be understood as having a quality, you need it to be done with something that has the same quality. So how are we supposed to understand Brahman, which is absolutely real, which is Sat, through these things which exist in the Jagat? The clear answer is, it is possible for Asat things to give us a Sat result. And the simple example that Bhagavad Pada gives using this rope snake is, although the snake you saw was false, the increased heartbeat and the sweat that it generated was real, right? So the results of a false stimulus to us can still be something that is very absolutely real, right? So that is why it must be stressed again, as I started off, that our gurus and shastras are, the most fundamental standpoint, the most fundamental starting point and adhara, the base that we have to understand this, right? So that is the jagat in terms of Advaita. Third, we come to the jiva. This jiva cannot be Brahman, right? On face value, the jiva cannot be Brahman because clearly we define Brahman, right? Brahman is eternal. Number one, jiva we think is not eternal, right? Because people are being born and they are dying, right? Second, Brahman is of the nature of Ananda, but these jivas seem to be perpetually unhappy, perennially unhappy, right? The other thing we said for Brahman is it is the cause of the birth, sustenance, and dissolution of the cosmos. The jiva himself is being born in some corner of a corner of a corner of some country, in some town, in some village, in some street. Right? So when the jiva himself is so limited, he can most certainly never be the immense, massive entity that Brahman is supposed to be. Right? So how is it then we say that this jiva is Brahman in Advaita? So that is where we bring in the concept of Maya. Right? There is this concept called Maya, and Bhagavad Pada very nicely says, Aghatana Ghatana Patiyasi Maya. Maya is that force that can do the impossible. Maya can do those things which for any other force would be seemingly impossible. Right? It is a very simple question that we ask ourselves. What caused you to see the rope as a snake instead of as a rope? Whatever force it was that caused that force on a cosmic scale is Maya. Right? It is through that Maya that Brahman creates the Jagat, right? Bhagavad again in Gita we say, Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Under my command, under my orders, as per my designation, Prakriti, Maya, whatever you want to call it, carries out the task of making these worlds and playing with them. Right? So it is this Maya, when it conceals Brahman, wraps him in the sheath of the mind, right, limits him to the antahkarana, that he is called the jiva. The simple fact is that if the jiva can throw off the shackles of the antaranga, if the jiva can throw off the bondage that the antahkarana, does everyone understand when I say antahkarana? The mind, right? The inner faculties, that the inner faculties impress on him. At that second, he ceases to be the bound jiva and becomes the unbound Paramatma. But as long as he is the jiva, he makes karma, right? He does things to which he accrues karma. He then takes more births in order to experience that karma. In the birth that he has taken, he then performs more karma. To experience that, he must then take another birth. And so this jiva is in a loop, in a cycle of doing karma and then experiencing it. The second that he achieves jnana, realizes he is not the body, the mind, the senses, and all of these appendages, and realizes his true nature as something that is unbound, not embodied, immense, eternal, right, beyond space and time, and all of that. He then ceases to be bound by these physical limitations and becomes freed from the circle of birth and death. Right? So this is the the sequence of the Jiva. So this is Brahman in Advaita, this is Ishvara this is Jiva in Advaita, and then this is the Jagat in Advaita. This is the relationship that these three share. And of course, then the process, how does the Jiva end up becoming Brahman? That is Shravana, Manana, and Nidhyasana. How does Brahman become the Jagat, right? That is Jagat Srishti Panchekarana. Right? There are then, inner arrows within the triangles to show how you get from one state to the other. Right? So the Brahman takes upon Maya, becomes Ishvara, through Ishvara, Maya gives rise to the Tanmatras, and the Tanmatras, the Pancha Mahabhutas are born. From the Mahabhutas, the Panchakrita Pancha Mahabhutas are born. From those, the Indriyas and all of those are born. That is the sequence of how the world is formed. And then when you have the Jiva trying to get moksha, the Jiva first does Shravana. He listens to the Tattva in Upanishads. He listens, he hears what the experience of realized souls is through the Upanishads. He then does manana of that, right, through logic and tarka, yukti viharanichintanam, through yukti, right, he confirms to himself that yes, the state that the Vedas are talking about is probable, possible, correct, and I too can attain that. And then he proceeds to nididhyasana, which is the actual exercise of the abhyasa that you need to do to actually attain that state of jnana. And once that is fruitful, he must attain jnana to get moksha. This is the last point I will touch on in terms of Advaita before moving on. What Advaita professes in difference, in contrast to other tattvas is Jnana Devatu Kaivalyam, right? Is the statement that Advaitins hold. Only through Jnana will we get moksha. There are several, Tamevam Viditva Amritatvameti. Only through knowing him, you will become Amrita, you will become undying, immortal. Right? Nanyaf Pantha Viditeyana Ayanaya. Veda is also very clear that besides this, there is no other path. Right? Because it is, this statement to us is revolutionary, but it is a quite straightforward proposition. Right? Given that the problem lays in our cognition, right? The problem lies in the way that we interact with this world. The problem lies in the way that we cognize this world. The problem lies in the way that we understand this world. So it is very obvious that the simplest fix to that is to understand, to realize, to know the world properly, right? Which is why jnana has to be it. Other darshanas will say sharanagati or bhakti or karma or the ekavimshri dukkha dhamsa. If you're a nayayika, if you're a sankhya purusha, it will be purusha prakriti jna viveka, right? So every darshana has its own idea of what it means to get moksha. In karma mimamsa, it is jijay vishat shatakam samaha. You keep doing yajnas, you go to svarga. That svarga is more or less moksha because it is called naka, that in which na aka, that in which there is no lack of happiness. Right? So for the Mimamsakas, Svarga is moksha. So each darshana has its own definition of moksha, of what it means to be released from samsara. But Advaita sets itself apart by firmly stating that it must be knowledge of the self as being non-different from Brahman. It must be the realization that the Jiva is Brahman. Jiva Brahmaiva Namaraha. That is what every single Upanishad is telling us, every single Itihasa is telling us, every single Purana is telling us. Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Ayamatma Brahma. All the Mahavakyas that Bhagavad Pada put in each of his pithas are statements that represent that same thing. Right? So this is Advaita in a nutshell. So I briefly mentioned one thing. Actually, I will quickly segue to the next topic before coming back to this. So this is the Advaita Tattva that Bhagavad Pada has propounded through all of his granthas. So thus far, I have given a summary of that. So the topic that has been assigned for today is Shivananda Lahari. Right? So Shivananda Lahari is, we'll switch modes from philosophy to a bit of poetry. Shivananda Lahari is one of the most beautiful stotras that Bhagavad Pada has given us. It is one of the two Laharis that Bhagavad Pada has written, technically three if you count Ananda Lahari. But there are two Shatakas, two centuries of shlokas. Right? We have Saundarya Lahari, 100 shlokas in which Devi is described. You have Shivananda Lahari, 100 shlokas in which Bhagavad Pada pleads with Shiva. These two stotras are actually slightly different in nature. Saundarya Lahari, the first 41 shlokas are very tantric, very yogic, right? Very upasana based in nature. From there on, the 42nd to the 100th shloka are all talking about the beauty of Devi's form, of course interspersed with Vedantic principles. In Shivananda Lahari, Bhagavad Pada does not go into upasana, Bhagavad Pada does not go into tantra, Bhagavad Pada does not go into mantras or bijakshanas or anything. It is a straight outpour of bhakti, a straight expression of how great Ishvara is, of how great Bhagavan is, of all his glories, of all his stories that are there in the Puranas, of all the leelas he performed, right? Kicking Yama, burning Manmatha, the Halahala Bhakshana, swallowing the poison that came out of the Kshetrasagara Mathana, all of these leelas come. And perhaps most charmingly, Bhagavatpada pleads with Ishvara in so many ways to please accept his heart as an offering. The number of similes that Bhagavatpada has used for the mind here perhaps cannot be found anywhere else. Bhagavatpada says that this mind is a mad elephant that needs to be put down with the ankusha, with the gourd of Shiva's bhakti. Bhagavatpada says that his manas is a cow that needs to be put in the goshala of Bhagavatpada's feet. Bhagavatpada says that his manas is a deer that can serve as a faster vehicle than Shiva's Nandi. Right? He says, you are on a bull, this may come, Vrishabha is, walks slowly, you may need something faster. So my manas is a kuranga, my manas is a deer. Climb on this, it will come faster. He says, you roam in Kailasa, right? On snowy mountains, on stones, on rocks. Your feet are kicking cruel people like Yama. So you need proper footwear for this. The way if you play tennis, you need tennis shoes. If you go skiing, you need ski shoes. Like that, if you want to do all of this, you need proper footwear. So take my manas as your padukas and put it under your feet. And then you can go wherever you want. Right? So many ways that Bhagavatpada has pleaded. He uses so many chamatkaras, right? There are so many puns that Bhagavatpada puts. First he says, you take my manas because there is nothing I can give you. Then second he says, you take my manas because there is nothing that you can give me. He says both of these statements in the same stotra. He says your dhanus is a golden mountain, right? The Meru Parvata is the dhanus he used. So your dhanus is a Meru Parvata. On your head you have Chandra, who is made up of Amrita, right? Parvati is your wife. All Shubhas are found at your feet. Your best friend is Kubera, right? The Adhipati, the Lord of all wealth. So what is there that is left that I can give you? One thing you do not have that I have is my manas, so here, take this. One shloka. Second, he says, you do not have anything that you can give me, right? You eat poison, right? You eat poison. What do you wear? You wear elephant skin, right? What do you wear as ornaments? You wear snakes. You have nothing that I want. If I want ornaments, I will go to some Lalita jewelers and buy something proper. I won't go to, Nagaloka or the zoo and go get a snake to wear. You have nothing that you have nothing that I want. And there is nothing that you can give that I want. Ashanangarai, you eat poison. Phani kalamaha, your ornaments are snakes. Vasanam charmacha, you wear skin. Vahanam mahokshaha, your car, your vehicle is a bull. Right? Mamadas says, what is there left for you to give? So there is nothing that you can give me. There is one thing you can give me bhakti towards you. That is the only thing I want from you. Don't give me anything that you have. Right? So Bhagavatpada has played with the idea of bhakti to Shiva in so many ways. But the reason I'm taking up Shivananda Lahari is the stamp, the trademark of Bhagavatpada is in the midst of all this bhakti, in the midst of all of this poetic genius, in the midst of all of these, playful requests that he makes to Shiva, there is still an Advaita Tattva that lays as an Antarvahini. Right? If you go to Kashi, you'll see Ganga and Yamuna. But Saraswati, right, is the river that flows underneath. Everyone goes to Yamuna and Ganga because they are more popular. But Saraswati is Devi Tame, Ambi Tame, Nadi Tame, Saraswati, right? So the greatest of rivers, the greatest of mothers, the greatest of devatas is Saraswati. And she is the Antarvahini there. So in the same way, Bhagavatpada melds these poetic, beauties and these beauties of expression whilst keeping an Advaitic current underneath. And to those seekers who wish to find that, they can very much go through, nitpick those shlokas and obtain that Advaitic essence from those shlokas. So, from what little I have learned, I have picked those two or three shlokas to share with you today. And then when you go home, you can yourselves learn Shivananda Lahari, teach it to your kids, hear pravachanas from Mahatmas and understand and experience the same Ananda that everyone in the past has experienced when they read Shivananda Lahari too. So this is the introduction to Shivananda Lahari. So we have Advaita and Shivananda Lahari. Now I will try to do the crossover. So I said that there is one phenomenon that happens, right, in Advaita, right, coming back to this, when we see the rope, right, when we see the rope and think it is a snake, right, the seeing of the snake in the rope, it is called superimposition in English. It is called adhyasa, right, it is called adhyasa, literally to put something on something else, right. The reality is a rope, you have imposed a snake on top of that, right. So this is the reason for which we mistake the word. We have taken Brahman and Jagat Adhyasa has happened on top of that. We have taken what is actually Brahman and superimposed the word on top of that. Right? It is called Atasmin Tat Buddhi. Thinking something is Tat when it is actually Atat. Thinking something is that which is not. That is the philosophical definition that is given in Sutra Bhashya. It is important that we understand this before we go into further Vedanta, because this is where the crux of the problem lies. As I said, it is a problem of cognition, which is why even before Bhagavad talks about the meaning of the first Brahma Sutra, Bhagavad writes a small portion, a couple of paragraphs called Adhyasa Bhashya. Adhyasa Bhashya is maybe no more than a page in length. But that Adhyasa Bhashya is the foundation of the entire Brahma Sutra Bhashya that follows. Because in the first sutra, what is there? Atha, Ataha, Brahma Jignasa. So Atha, now that, right? Atha means now, henceforth, because, now. Ataha means because, therefore. Brahma Jignasa, the desire to know Brahman arises. So now, therefore, we wish to know Brahman, is the way that it starts. Now means having acquired all the proper qualifications to be a Vedanta sadhaka. So Viveka, Vairagya and all of that. Ataha, therefore. What is the reason? What is the reason you say therefore? You say therefore when there is an obvious means to an end. Right? You say therefore when there is a conclusion you are drawing and there is a means to get there. That means is designated with the word therefore. Right? You say I need to eat, therefore I must cook. Right? I need to go somewhere, therefore I must walk. Right? So the means is designated by therefore. So Brahma Jignasa, right? What is the goal of the Brahma Sutras? Moksha, right? Vedanta, the goal of Vedanta is moksha. So he says, therefore I wish to know Brahman because moksha is the goal, right? So now Bhagavad has to show why it has to be the knowing, jignasa, right? The desire to know is jignasa. So why is it that you must know Brahman to get moksha, right? That is what Bhagavad has to explain when he says ataha, therefore. Right? So when he explains this, that is why he takes up the Adhyasa, where he says, we have understood Brahman the wrong way, we have understood the Jagat the wrong way, we need to understand it properly, we need to know Brahman properly, and therefore it is important that we need to know Brahman in order to achieve moksha. Right? And Adhyasa is very simple. Adhyasa goes when you get Adhisthana Jnana. Adhisthana is the base, right? So upon what is the snake imposed? On the rope, right? Right? Upon which is the dream imposed upon reality. Let's stick with the rope and snake. Right? The snake is imposed on the rope. So the rope is the adhisthana, the support, the base. When you know the base, the adhisthana ceases to be. There is no one in this world that after the light is turned on can still see that rope as a snake. Right? He may have thought of it as a snake before, he may have biologically classified it, given its taxonomical derivation and whatnot. But the second the light turns on, there is no force in heaven and hell that can make him think that it is a snake. Right? The second that the base's nature is truly understood, Adhyasa ceases to be. Right? So that is why Bhagavad starts off his Brahma Sutra Bhashya with the Adhyasa. We need to understand what the nature of our delusion is. Right? The number one step to curing an illness is diagnosing the illness. Right? So that diagnosis is Adhyasa. So Bhagavad brings this out in Shivananda Lahari. Right? So in one of the first shlokas, यथा बुद्धिशुक्तौ रजतमिति काचाश्मनि मणिः जले परिष्टे क्षीरं भवति मृगतृष्णा सुसलिलं तथा देव भ्रान्त्या भवति भवदन्यं जडजनः महादेवेशं त्वां मनसि च नमत्वा पशुपते. You will find this in the first 10 shlokas, right? So first I will explain the meaning normally and then we will see how it falls into Vedanta. So Bhagavad is saying, Shiva, fools, deluded people run after other things instead of worshipping you. And how is it that they view other things? As in the same way that people think that within a shell they see silver, right? I don't know, if you go to the beach, right? You will see something shine. You will go there, if you look at the shiny thing, it will be the inside of a shell. There is some metallic looking coating that will be there in the inside. It is very commonly mistaken to be silver. Right? So, in the same way that someone may look at silver, or may look at a shell and mistake it for silver. In the same way, Kajashmani Manihi. In the same way that, there are some colored beads, right? They'll be very, red and shiny. They are very easily mistaken for gemstones. In the same way that someone could look at a cheap, worthless bead and think of it as a gem. In the same way that someone can think of flour mixed in water as milk. Jale paishte, pishta is flour. Jale paishte kshiram. Right? If you mix flour and water, it will look like milk, right? It will become white in color. In Mahabharata, there is a big drama about this where Ashwatthama asks for milk, Dronacharya has no milk, so he gives him, this same flour mixed in water. Ashwatthama drinks it, says it's not milk, and then this whole story goes, to the Mahabharata. What we don't have to go there, but the same thing happens there. So in the same way that someone may look at, flour mixed in water and think that it is milk. Bhavati Mragatrishnasu Salilam. In the same way that someone may look at a mirage and think that there is actually water there. In the same way, some people run after things other than you, forgetting about you who are the Isha of this world, who is the master of this world. People run after other devatas and other sources of happiness, forgetting you. Right? So very simple shlokam, in the sense that people don't realize that you are there to give them whatever they want. They run after all sorts of other things. Right? Very simple shloka that expresses bhakti. But if you look at the examples given, each one of these are examples of adhyasa. In the beginning, the Shukti Rajata, the shell and the silver, is one of the quintessential examples of adhyasa. And all darshanas, all philosophies use the same thing. And the beauty is, how did you see the silver in the shell? Right? There are several different schools of thought. They will say that the samskara of seeing a silver is there before that is imposed on the shell, or otherwise there is a facsimile silver that is made there. All of those philosophical arguments are there. But the point being that all of these examples that Bhagavad has given are Vedantic examples used to show that we look at the Jagat hoping for Brahman, but we are looking in the wrong way. Right? What do we see? It is called Parasparadhyasa. We put the qualities of Brahman, we impose the qualities of Brahman on the world, and we impose the qualities of the world on Brahman. Right? What are the qualities of Brahman? If we think back, Sat Chit Ananda, we said, right? Existence, consciousness, bliss. So these same things, Asti Bhati Priyam Bhavati. These are the way that Sanskritam puts it. It is, right? Asti Bhati, it shines, right? It is available. And Priyam Bhavati, it is dear. Right? These are the qualities of Brahman. But instead, what do we look in the world? We look for happiness in this. We think that it is objects that exist, right? You say that chair exists. No one says Brahman exists when they look at a chair, right? We ascribe the existence to the chair instead of the existence principle that is latent within the chair. In the same way, Bhati, we say the chair exists. We do not say Brahman exists, right? Or the chair shines literally. Bhati means it is experienced, is literally what it means. We say that the chair is experienced, we do not say that Brahman is experienced. In the same way, Priyam Bhavati, we say that, let us say we read a good book, right? We say the book gave me happiness, when in reality happiness lies within. Every happiness that we get extrinsically is an expression of the intrinsic happiness. That is what Yajnavalkya tells Maitreyi in Brihadaranyaka. He says, Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. And in that actually it is Nava Are. He even calls Maitreyi Are. Nava Are Patyuf kamaya patih priyo bhavati. Atmanastu kamaya patih priyo bhavati. He says the husband is not dear to the wife because of the husband. The husband is dear to the wife because of the wife. In the same way, he says the reverse also. Nava Are Jaya priya bhavati. The wife is not dear to the husband because of the wife. The wife is dear to the husband because of the husband. Right? So all happiness that we seek is intrinsic. Right? The external things that we seek for happiness are udbodhakas. They merely bring out the ananda that is already latent within us. Right? So we seek for this Satchidananda, which is actually Brahman, in the lattice, in the framework of the world. And then the reverse also happens. The qualities of the Jagat are to be the exact opposite of this Jada, right? Insentient, and it is limited in space and time. We apply that to ourselves, right? We have said that we are actually Brahman, our true nature is Brahman. But we apply that to ourselves, saying that I am limited, I was born then, I will die then, I exist in this much space, my name is this, my form is this. So we apply the principles of the Jagat to ourselves. Right? So this Parasparadhyasa, right, seeing the qualities of Brahman in the world, or imposing the qualities of Brahman on the world, and then imposing the qualities of the world on ourselves, on our true nature, is the problem. Right? And Bhagavad highlights this in the same way, where he says, people run after the world looking for this ananda, for this happiness, for this moksha, instead of running after you. And this is because of this adhyasa. Right? So if we look at this shloka now, on face value it is very simple. When Parameshwara is there, why do we need to go after anything else? There is actually another very nice shloka, I think either Appai Dikshit or Nilakanta Dikshit wrote it. He says, Karabhavanusaramaha kamadhenau sthitaya. He says, Shiva, when you are there, we run after other things. This is like you have kamadhenu in your backyard and you are running after a camel trying to milk it. This is the same situation as having Shiva, Chandramanishwara, ready, for us in our puja mandira, but instead seeking external happiness, right? So that is what Bhagavad Pada has brought out in this shloka, right? So simple shloka, but a very nice Advaitic concept underneath, where he shows us that instead of looking for happiness in knowing Ishvara, instead of looking for happiness in knowing the Atma Tattva, we seek happiness in everything other than that. This is one example. We also talked about the nature of Brahman, the fact that Brahman is Satchidananda. Right? When Bhagavad Pada, whichever Devata Bhagavad Pada worships, that Devata is Brahman. Which is why I like to call them cut and paste shlokas. You will see these cut and paste shlokas across Bhagavad Pada Sahitya. When you go to Shivananda Lahari, Sharadamba Lahari, what will you see? You will see that the dust of Devi's feet is being held on the heads of every single Devata. Right? Taniyamsam Pamsam Tavajarana Pankero Bhavam Virinchis Sanchinvan Viracheti Loka Navikalam. Devi, with the dust of your feet, Brahma is creating these words. With the dust of your feet, Hari is, bearing all the words on his head as Adishesha. With the dust, with the power of your dust, Shiva applies that as Bhasma and is able to do dissolution of these words. So there it is Devi's feet, that are being placed on everyone's head. You fast forward to Nrisimha Karavalamba. Brahmendra Rudra Marudarka Kireta Kote Sanghattitanti Kamala Amala Kanti Kanta. Lakshmi Lasatkura Saruru Haraja Hamsa Lakshmi Nrisimha Amadehi Karavalamba. Brahma, Indra, Rudra, Vayu, Surya, all of these devatas are coming and doing Nirajanam to your feet with the lights of the Kiritas. So now what do we have? We have all of the devatas, Shiva and Devi included, coming and doing Namaskaram to Nrisimha. You come to Shivananda Lahari, plenty of stotras where Bhagavad Pada says that, the devatas of Namat Surashira Kotira Sangharshanam. He says, Shiva, your feet must be very bruised by now, by all the devatas, kiritas coming up and rubbing against them. Right? So your soft, delicate feet must have been very badly bruised by now. Please give them to me. Hastena samvahe. I will press them with my hand. Bhagavad Pada says. So now what has happened in this scenario? All the devatas are now doing namaskaram to Shiva, Vishnu and Devi and everyone else included. So there is a saying in Telugu, Yavarki pellite vade pelli koduku. Whoever's marriage it is, he is the groom for that day. In the same way, whichever devata that Bhagavad Pada is wishing to praise, right? That devata is Parabrahman, no questions asked. So now when we take Shiva as Parabrahman, all, it is like, acting CEO. Well, the second that the president signs that, all the powers of the previous CEO are now attained by the new CEO. In the same way, when the second that Bhagavad Pada starts doing puja of Shiva, Shiva is the end it all, be it all Parabrahman. There is no one greater than Shiva. It is in Shiva that the world's light is. Shiva that creates, Shiva that destroys, Shiva that dissolves, Shiva that gives jnana, Shiva that gives moksha, everything. Right? So Bhagavad Pada talking about Shiva then says, Nityaya Trigunatmane Purajite Katyayani Shreyase Satyaya Adikutumbine Munimanaf Pratyaksha Chinmottaye Maya Srishta Jagatrayaya Sakalamnayanta Sancharine Sayam Tandava Sambhamaya Jatine Seyam Natish Shambhave. He says Namaskaram to that Shambhu who is ever engaged in the Sayam Tandava. So right about this time, in the evening Pradoshakala in Kailasa, Bhagavan, Saha Samaya Lasya Paraya with his dear consort who is Lasyeshwari in the Mooladhara, while he is Adinatha. With that Devi, he is dancing always in Kailasa. But if we look at all the Visheshanas, all the adjectives that Bhagavad Pada has given Shiva, these are not adjectives that describe Shiva as the Devata that has 3 eyes, a Shula, Damaru is the husband of Parvati, the lord of the Pramathaganas. That is not the Shiva that Bhagavad Pada has described. If you remove that last Pada, Bhagavad Pada may well have just given, a Brahma Lakshana. Nityaya. Nityaya, we need to describe this carefully because Nityaya and Satyaya both come. So there is a Vyakhya that was found. It is Ajnata Kartrika. We do not know who made it. But it was curated by a great Pandita, Manindravadi Shastriji's father. So he has curated that and given us this Vyakhya. In that he has shown the difference between the word Nitya and Satya. So Satya means that which exists across all three times, and he has slightly differently defined Nitya as that which does not change over all three times, right? So we may exist over a period of time, but we also change over that period of time, right? While I am a child, I am different. While I am older, I am different. When I am old, when I am, old age, I am different. In my youth, I am different. So although I exist for all these times, I change. The difference in Brahman is it is Nitya, as in its nature does not change, and it is Satya. It is existent in past, present, and future. Trigunatmane. This is another very interesting word because Atma has so many different meanings in Upanishad. But here, what the Vyakhyakarta said is Atma means Sharira. Trayaha gunaha eva sharirani yasya. Right? So the three gunas make up the body. And what he wrote here is Brahma, Vishnu, Rudra, Rupaha, Rupani, Sharirani. So with the three gunas, Brahman becomes Ishvara, Ishvara expresses himself as Brahma, Vishnu, and Rudra in order to perform the three functions of Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, and then it is Sadashiva that does Tirodhana and all that. But the reason here is when he takes upon Rajas, when he becomes Rajas Pradhana, right? When the Maya that defines Ishvara becomes Rajas Pradhana, it does Srishti as Brahma, Chaturmukha Brahma. When the Maya that surrounds Ishvara becomes Sattva Pradhana, it manifests as Vishnu, who does Sthiti, Sthema, the Rakshana, the protection of the worlds, keeping the worlds in equilibrium. And then when the Maya surrounding Ishvara becomes Tamah Pradhana, when he takes upon his Tamasi Shakti, he becomes Rudra, who does Laya, he dissolves the three worlds. And we see this brought out in the Shiva Mahimna Stotra, where Pushpadanta says, Bahula Rajase Vishwotpattau Bhavaya Namo Namaha. When you take upon Rajas and you create the Vishwa, you are called Bhava. Right? Bhavati Jagad Asmat iti Bhavaha. He from whom the world is born is called Bhava. Right? So when you take upon Rajas, you become the creator of the world as Bhava. Bahula Tamase Tat Samhare Haraya Namo Namaha. When you take upon Tamas, you become the dissolution, you become the destroyer of the worlds. You become Hara, literally he who snatches away, he who takes away, he who destroys. When you take upon Tamas. And then Jana Sukhakrite Satvodriktau Shiva Mridaya Namo Namaha. Right? Mrida means he who is happy and who makes someone happy. Right? So when you wish to give Sukha to everyone, you take upon Sattva and you are then called Mrida. But your true nature is different. Pramahasipade Nistre Gunye. When you transcend these three gunas, right, and when you attain that state that is Nistre Gunya, beyond the three gunas, you are then called Shiva. Shivaya Namo Namaha. Namaskaram to you then. Another nice overlap between the things that Bhagavad Pada writes. So this is what Pushpadanta has said, right? When you transcend the three gunas, you are called Shiva. In the Vishnu Sahasranama, when Bhagavad Pada has said Sarva Sharva Shivasthanu, when Bhagavad Pada has to define Shivaha there in context of Vishnu, he writes Nistraya Gunyatvat Nirvikaro Bhavati Shuddho Bhavati Iti Shivaha. Same definition is given there. Because he is pure due to being bereft of the three gunas, he is then called Shiva. Right? So it is very clear to us that Bhagavad Pada, whether he takes Shiva or Vishnu, the qualities ascribed are the same. Right? Brahman is always beyond the three gunas, but when it takes upon the three gunas, when Ishvara takes upon the three gunas, he then carries out the functions of Srishti Sthiti Laya. Nityaya Trigunatmane Purajite. Right? With Shiva, Purajit, literally the conqueror of the Puras. Puras are cities. So with Shiva, the Tripurasura Samhara is very common. Right? There were three cities that were flying. They got three Rakshasas got a boon from Brahma that they can be killed only by a Devata Sarvabhauma, by the emperor of Devatas, who must shoot them all with one single arrow. Right? So this is the boon that they have gotten, and these three cities are flying all over the place, causing havoc. So then what Parameshwara does is he takes the earth, Bhumi as his chariot, Surya Chandra as the chariot wheels, Brahma is the Sarathi, the Vedas are the horses, Vishnu becomes the arrow, the ocean becomes the quiver, Sudarshana becomes the tip of the arrow, Vasuki becomes the bowstring. All of this happens. He shows his dominion over all the devatas, and he burns the three cities. So he is Tripurajit, right? He is Purajit. He is the conqueror of the cities. But obviously, when we are interpreting this with Ishvara, as Brahman, there is a different meaning. The Puras are the bodies, right? Navadvare Pure Dehi. Naiva Kurvan Nakarayan. Again, we get in Gita, right? This body is a Pura, right? Or Kshetra. So, Tripura, there are three Puras that Brahman transcends. The Sthula Sukshma Karana Shariras, the Sthula body, the Sthula Sharira, the gross body, the Sukshma Sharira, which is the Antahkarana, right? The inner organs, the Indriyas and the Pranas form the Sukshma Sharira, and then the Karana Sharira is our root identity as a Jiva, where it is, the Ananda covered by Avidya, covered by ignorance. Right? So these are the three bodies that Brahman transcends. Purajite, Katyayani Shreyase. He is the fruit, Shreyase, Tapaphalaya. He is the fruit of Parvati's tapas. Right? Satyaya, we have discussed Satya. Adi Kutumbine. This is another very beautiful statement, both Vedantically and poetically. Adi Kutumbine means he is the first family man. He is the first person to have a family. Right? Because if we take him to be Adi Purusha, right? If we take him to be the primordial Devata, he is the first person, and with him he has Parvati, Ganesha, Skanda, and the family is there. So Adi Kutumbine is, the first father, first mother, Adi Dampati, all of that we say. But if we take this with Brahman, right? Brahman is the first entity to ever exist. And when we say Kutumbini as a family, it means that it is from Brahman that everything else has emerged. Right? Even the creator, Brahma, right? The Chaturmukha Brahma, has emerged from Brahman. Right? So we have the very nice mantra, Hiranyagarbha Samavartatagre Bhutasya Jataha Patihi. Right? So even when we have Hiranyagarbha, who is said to be the Prathama Jiva, the creator of these worlds, Veda still says he is Jataha, he is born. Right? And then in the same way, there are such statements where we see that Vishnu is also referred to as Jato Brahan. Vishnu is referred to Brahan Jataha, I think it comes in Veda also. So it is a reminder to us that, in Veda, all devatas are also born the same way. It is the Brahman from which everything is born. And Appaya Dikshita, a very great Shiva Bhakta, has written this one stotra called Pancharatna Stuti, in which he shows with Vedic proof that there are places in which it is not just Narayana that is referred to as Anadi in Vedas, Shiva also is referred to in the same way. Right? He says, Samavartateti Variruhasanasya Jato Brahmiti Janishcha Haref Prasiddha. He says. So, there are mantras that show that Vishnu was born, there are mantras that show that Brahma was born. So, Yasmad Ajata iti mantra aropadishta tamrudrameva chakita sharanam prapadye. So, from whom both Brahma and Vishnu were born, to that Rudra I do namaskara. And there's another mantra that we get, Vishwadhiyo Rudro Maharshihi Hiranyagarbham Pashyata Jayamanagam Sanodeva Shubhaya Smritya Sanyanapto. May that Deva, may that Ishvara give us a proper mindset, a healthy mindset. And what kind of Deva? That Deva who was Hiranyagarbham Pashyata Jayamanagam. That Deva who saw Hiranyagarbha being born. That Devata who was witness to Brahma's birth. Means this Devata preceded Brahma. Right? So in Veda we have in several places showing that Brahman, even as Shiva, is the Adi Deva. He is Adi Deva, Mahadeva. He precedes everything else. Adi Kutumbine Munimanaf Pratyaksha Chinmurtaye. He is Chinmurti. His nature is Chaitanya. Right? Maya Srishta Jagatrayaya. With the help of Maya, he has created these three worlds. Sakalamnayanta Sancharine. He is found. His residence is the Amnayanta, Vedanta. Right? So what is it that teaches us about Brahman? The Vedantas, the Upanishads, right? So, because the Upanishads teaches of Brahman, Brahman is said to be found in the Upanishads. Sakalamnayanta Sancharine, and then Sayam Tandava Sambramaya, he who is very engaged in doing the Sandhya Tandava. So, if we take out this one word and we look at the rest of the shloka, this has nothing to do with Shiva in specific, but rather is just telling us about Brahman in general. So, I think, can I wrap up in 15 minutes? Yes. Is that okay? Okay. So, two more shlokas I want to talk about. Second is the idea of moksha, right? We talk about moksha being released from this samsara chakra. Generally speaking, there are four kinds of moksha: sarupya, salokya, samipya, sayujya. These are the chaturvidha muktis that we generally find. Right? Sarupya means attaining. First comes salokya or sarupya. You attain the same form as the devata. Then salokya, you go to the loka of that devata. Samipya, you are able to serve that devata from a very close standpoint. In the end, sayujya, you merge with the devata, you become one with the devata. Bhagavad-pada has very nicely shown us how all four stages of this moksha are obtained through doing Shiva Puja itself. Sarupyam tava pujane Shiva Mahadeveti Sankirtane Samipyam Shiva Bhakti Dharya Janata Sangatya Sambhashane Salokyam Characharatmaka Tanudhyane Bhavani Pate Sayujyam Mama Siddhamatra Bhavati Swamin Kritarthosmyaham. He says, Ishvara, the second I sit down to do your puja, I have attained Sarupya. Because how do we sit down? Rudra Marchayet. Right? We sit down first as Rudra to do Rudra Puja. And of course, Maharudras and Adirudras happen in every single one of Manimama's temples. So you would have seen Maharudras and Adirudras happen. We do Mahanyasa before that, right? We place Rudra in our body before we do these pujas. That aside, Sarupya, the Rupa Samya is also there in that. We wear Rudrakshas, we put on Vibhuti, Bhasma and all of that. So we attain the Rupa of Shiva the second that we sit down to do his puja. So just by commencing Shiva Puja, Sarupya Mukti has been attained, Bhagavad Pada is saying. Then the second I start to do your Nama Sankirtana, Shiva, Mahadeva, the second I start calling out your name. In that second itself, I have attained Samipya, right? Because Samipya is what? Proximity, right? With this Sambodhana, right? Vocative. Calling out to someone in Vyakarana is called Abhimukhi Karanam. You only call out to someone that is in your presence, right? So you say Samipyam. If I am calling out to you, it is because you are in my presence. The second I call you, you must be in my presence. Therefore, the second I do Nama Sankirtana, I have attained Samipya. Then, when I do Satsanga, Shiva Bhakti Dhurya Janata Sangatya Sambhashane Salokyam. When we go to Kailasa and we go to Kailasa Loka, why would we go there? Because there are other bhaktas that have attained Kailasa Loka, because there are, great Purushas there, like Nandi, Bhungi, Niti, Tundi, all of these people are there, right? All the great Shivaganas are there, Shiva Bhaktas are there, we get to spend time with them, we get to think of Bhagavan, we get to, do Bhagavan Namasmarana and all of that with other bhaktas that are there with us. So the second that I spend time with other Shiva Bhaktas, the second that I speak with other Shiva Bhaktas of your Mahima, I have already attained the benefits of Salokya. So the second I spend time with other bhaktas, I have attained Salokya Mukti. And this last part is particularly beautiful because Sayujya, right? Sahayujyate iti sayuk, tasya bhavaha sayujyam. Right? To be united with something is Sayujya. When you merge with something wholeheartedly, you become one in essence. That is Sayujya. There is no more separation, there is no more serving, there is no more looking. You become one with the Devata. That is Sayujya. Now, even we will be a bit curious to see how Bhagavad Pada manages to incorporate this into a shloka about pujas that we do. He says, Characharatmaka tanudhyane bhavani pate sayujyam mama siddham bhavati. He says, he points out a very specific form of aradhana that is done of Shiva. Shiva is very commonly worshipped as Ashtamurti. So we see, even in Lalita Sahasranama, right? Ashtamurtira Ekatma, we get there too, but also in this also, Bhurambham Syanalo Anilo Nilombara Maharnatho Himamshuhu Puman. Right? These are the 8 forms that Shiva takes. The Panchabhutas, Surya, Chandra, and the Yajamana, the Purusha. Right? So Bhagavad Pada says, the second that I do Ashtamurti Upasana, Ashtamurti Aradhana, the second I meditate upon you as these Characharatmaka Tanus, right? Surya, Chandra, and the Jiva are Chara, they move. The Panchabhutas, by nature are Jada, they do not move. So doing this Ashtamurti worship is Characharatmaka Tanadhyana. You are worshipping the mobile and immobile forms, these 8 forms of Shiva. So when I do this, I must necessarily think of you also as the Puman, as the Yajamana. So the second I do that as part of my puja, I have attained oneness with you. Because I have understood that I, the Yajamana, the performer of worship, am the same as the object of worship. So by doing Ashtamurti Upasana, Parameshwara, I have attained Sayujya also. So Samrupya, Samipya, Salokya, Sayujya. All 4 muktis are attained Shiva in your worship. It is noteworthy that Advaita is the only philosophy that allows for Sayujya. No other philosophy says that you can become, that you are the unbounded blissful entity that you worship. And also Advaita is the only Siddhanta that allows for Jivan Mukti. The idea that you can attain moksha here, now, on this earth as you are. That is why Veda says, it is very careful. Yadahareva virajet, tadahareva pravrajet. The second that you get Vairagya, leave your house, leave whatever bondages you have and go seek Atman. Because you will not get this chance again, and this chance is to be seized here and now. Right? So the idea of Jivan Mukti, that you can have moksha in this loka, as Bhagavad Pada said, doing worship, doing upasana, doing Shravanamana and Nidhyasana here and now. That is only possible in Advaita. In all other philosophies, Only after this body falls, you go to a Lokantara and serving the Bhagavan there is moksha. But in Advaita, it is here and now that man can attain perfection. Right? So that is what Bhagavad Pada has shown in this. Now the last question that we will have is, what is the path to this moksha? What is the blueprint that Bhagavad Pada has set us to do if we wish to get to this jnana sthiti in the end? With this last sentence, with last shloka, I will wrap up. So Bhagavad Pada very nicely gives us the imagery of a garden. He says, Shambhudhyana Vasanta Sangini Hridarame Aghajirna Chadas Rastaha Bhakti Latachata Vilasitaha Punya Pravalashtritaha Deepyante Gunakorakaha Japavachaf Pushpadi Sattvasanaha Jnanananda Sudhamaranda Lahari Samvit Phala Bhinnatihi. So this is a sequence. So the simile that Bhagavad Pada is giving is, when spring enters a garden, there is a certain change that happens in that garden before it attains the full-fledged beauty, splendor that comes with spring. When you think of spring, you think of vines, creepers, blossom, flowers, fruits, mangoes. That is what you wish, in the spring. But obviously, in the beginning of spring, winter has just come. There are dead leaves, dead branches. The bark also does not look nice. Nothing in a garden looks nice at the end of winter. But the second that spring ends, the garden has attained its full potential. So in the same way, before this jiva sets out in his path of sadhana, he is unhappy. But by the end, if he has performed these sadhanas properly, if he has done his anushthanas properly, if he has sought this jnana properly under the Guru as per Shastra, he will end up as complete and as full as this garden ends up after spring. So what Bhagavad Pada says there is, Shambhudhyana Vasanta Sangini. So first, the spring that needs to enter this heart, to revive this heart, is called Shambhudhyana. Meditation upon Shiva is the number one catalyst for this heart to start rejuvenating. And then what happens? Hridara me, the manas is the garden. Aghad jirna chadas rastaha. Chadaha literally means coverings, right? Achada, achadayati, it covers, right? So what is it that covers our heart? It is aghas, all the papa vasanas that we have accumulated, all the ill tendencies that we have accumulated over God knows how many millennia, over how many thousands of janmas. That is all the dead leaves, the dead bark, all that dead matter that covers the garden. All of those are the purva papa vasanas that we have. But the second that the spring of Shivadhyana enters the mind, those papa vasanas fall off, the same way that dead leaves fall off and leave the garden when spring enters. Then immediately what happened? Bhakti lata chata vilasitaha. The creepers, the vines of bhakti start growing. And bhakti being compared to a vine is very appropriate because a vine's nature is to wrap itself around something and not let go. Right? The point of bhakti is for us to wrap ourselves around Paramatma and never let go. Which is why even in another shloka in this, he says, Latakshiduraham, Sindhus Saritvallabham. In giving examples of bhakti, he says, just as the river goes to the ocean, as a vine wraps itself around a tree, the bhakta must wrap himself around Paramatma. Right? So the imagery of a vine is very important for bhakti because it allows us to latch on to Paramatma. So what is the vine that now has sprouted in this garden? Once the papa vasanas have fallen off, and once we are doing Shivadhyana, bhakti or the creeper is the creeper that now has sprouted in this garden. And then on this vine, right, flowers have to start blossoming. The first blossoms or the first buds are seen. These are Punya Pravalashtritaha. The buds of Punya Vasanas are now found. Right? Punyas, because of bhakti, through doing Satkarma, through doing all of these, karma, sandhya, vandana, dhyana, japa, through all of these, we get rid of those papa vasanas and start accumulating punya, right? Tapasa kilbisham bhanti, right? Karma and chitya shuddhyartham. All the importance that Bhagavad Pada ascribes to karma comes here. Karma is the number one way that we can purify our heart and accumulate punya because a lot of us say, I wish to learn Vedanta, I do not have a guru. I wish to learn Vedanta, I just never find the time. I wish to learn Vedanta, I do not have the means. Those means need to be bought with punya. So the punya that is born of the Shiva Bhakti is what allows us to perform these sadhanas. So from the vine of Bhakti, the buds of punya start emerging. And then from those Deepyante Gunakorakaha, Satgunas, right? Auspicious qualities, good qualities, the Devi Sampatti, Abhayam, Sattva Samshuddhi, Dhyana Yoga Vyavasthiti, Jnanam, Dama, Shama, Swadhyaya, all of these good qualities that make us more Daiva, that bring us closer. Daivi Sampat Vimokshaya, Bhagavan says, right? All of these Daivi Sampattis that bring us closer to moksha follow from that Bhakti Lata and develop from the Punya buds. Right? So the Bhakti Lata, the vine of Bhakti, has given us of the buds of Punya, which has turned into the blossom of Gunakora, which has turned into the blossom of Devi Sampatti. And then when that fully fructifies, right? Vipyante Gunakorakaha Japavachaf Pushpani. When that blossoms even more and becomes a full-fledged flower, those become Japavachaf Pushpani. Japa, Upasana is the closest thing that we have in our daily routine to Nididhyasana and to proper Brahmaradhana. When we are given a mantra and a devata by a guru, all three of whom share the same nature, and we are told to meditate upon that every day within, inwards, and thinking of that Bhagavan as seated in the middle of the heart, on that Bhagavan as seated in the Surya Kola. All of these are upasanas that are told for us to do that bring us ever so closer to Brahman. Right? So from the blossoms of the punya karmas, when they find even more fruition, turn into proper japa and upasana. And then after that, right, flower turns into a fruit. Right after that, that is the next step. So then what you have is, from a flower comes the honey, right? The nectar that comes from the flower. The nectar that flows from that is Jnanananda Sudhamaranda Lahari. Now again we have another problem because the word after this is Samvit Phalabhinnatihi. Jnana and Samvit generally mean the same thing. But if they mean the same thing, Bhagavad Pada will not use it twice. Right? So there is a difference between this Jnana and that Samvit. This Jnana is called Paroksha Jnana. There are two types of Jnana that we can get of Brahman. The first one is called Paroksha Jnana, where you understand Brahman academically. You sit down with a textbook, some Paribhasha, Tattvabodha, whatever textbooks you have, you sit down, you describe Brahman, you give it a quality, you make sure it does not have Ativyapti, Avyapti, it does not Atiprasakta anywhere, you make sure that this definition fits Brahman, it does not define anything other than Brahman, it does not define Brahman in any situations, you get this academic understanding of Brahman through academic study. But this is not the experience of Brahman and this does not give moksha. Granted, it helps a lot, but this does not give moksha. Which is why Bhagavad Pada wrote Aparoksha Anubhuti, not Paroksha Anubhuti. Right? The means of getting to that state in which Brahmajnana is not second hand. Because when we learn from these Shastras, there are Rishis and Munis that have had this experience. They have given us their experience and we are getting an academic understanding from that. So it is Paroksha, literally understood with others' faculties. Right? So this understanding is good. This comes from the Upasana standpoint. The next step is Paroksha Jnana. Right? The honey of Paroksha Jnana flows. And then once this flower that has this honey fully becomes the fruit that it was truly meant to be, then you have Samvit Phala Abhyunnatihi. Then the fruit of Aparoksha Jnana, the fruit of the experience of that Jnana, at which point immediately you attain Brahma Jnana. Right? So again, Vedanta says, Bhidyate Hridaya Granthihi, Chidyante Sarva Samshayaha, Kriyante Chasya Karmani Tasmin Drishte Paravare. The second that metaphysical entity that surpasses all else is understood, that very second, Hridaya Granthihi Bhidyate. There is a lock in our heart. There is a knot between Sat and Asat, between that which is real, that which is not. This is the lock between. We talked about the way that Brahman imposes itself on the Jagat and the Jagat on our nature, right? So that lock immediately is untied. That knot is untied. And then Vidyate Hare Granthe, Chidyante Sarva Samshaya. Any doubts we may have had about what our true nature actually is, any doubts we may have had about the nature of Brahman, those are torn apart. And then Kriyante Chasya Karmani, that very second, all of his Sanchita Karma is burnt away. Right? Because Jnanagnya Sarva Karmani Bhasmasat Kurute. Right? The fire of Jnana burns those karmas. No karmas equals no rebirth here to be taken. You finish your prarabdha, that is it, you get Videha Kaivalya. Right? So that very second his karmas are burned. The very instant that Brahma Jnana occurs, that very second Brahmavit Brahmaiva Bhavati, the knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. Right? So that is the last stage that Bhagavad Pada tells us is the Samvit Phala. So if we wish to truly bring spring into the garden of our heart, what Bhagavad Pada is telling us through Shivananda Lahari is the first step of that spring is doing dhyana of Parameshwara. So sitting down, doing whatever stotra parayana, doing sandhya vandana, doing mantra japa, doing whatever sadhana it is that we can do every day. That is the number one step. From there, sattvasanas coming, punyas coming, doing upasana, then studying shastra, studying Vedanta, all of this comes. But the first step is Bhagavad Bhakti, which is why Bhagavad Pada says in Viveka Chudamani, Moksha sadhana samakriyam bhaktireva gariyasi. The best weapon that Bhagavan has given us to understand Him, right? The Swaswarupanasandhana, to understand Him is Bhakti. Bhakti is the first step that we can take in order to understand that Bhagavan and to understand ourselves. And I'll finish with Gita where Bhagavan says, Bhaktiyat tvaranyaya shakyah aham evam vidhorjuna jnatum drashtuncha tatvena praveshtuncha parantapa. It is with bhakti, Bhagavan, after showing his Vishwarupa that Arjuna is terrified by, after showing Arjuna that he is Kala, that is boundless, timeless, immense. Arjuna says, how am I supposed to understand you? Bhagavan says, Naham Veda, it is not Vedas that allows me to be found. It is not tapas, it is not dana, it is not homas. Bhaktyatu ananyaya shakyaha. It is unswerving, unadulterated, pure bhakti that allows me to be found. And then not just found, jnatum, you will know me, drashtum, you will see me, tatvena praveshtum, by all means, you will enter into my essence. That sayuja we were talking about is what you will attain, Arjuna, if you start with this bhakti. So it is our fortune, our bhagya, our purva punya paripaka that we are fortunate enough to be sitting in a devalaya that has the blessings of the Mahapurushas of Sakshat Shankaracharya's Jagadgurus, and to be sitting in a temple that was built with the Sahakara and the Sadutsaha and the blessings also of Madimama, who I am very fortunate is my Vedam teacher's Guru. So it is with his blessings that I have been, growing up since I was young. I have been, the ability to see Madimama every Vijayadashami and do Guru Vandanam in the Stroudsburg temple were all very much parts that I looked forward to and cherished. So the ability to have the Satsangatya of such Mahapurushas and do Aradhana of Bhagavan in such temples, and the fortune to count ourselves part of a parampara that includes, the Sringeri Jagadgurus, is all a reminder to us that we must not let this chance slip. Right? This marga of Bhakti Sadhana and Dhyana, Bhagavad Dhyana, is something that we all must do. So let us take Bhagavad Pada's words to mind and heart, and with these few words that I have learned through the grace of the Jagadgurus, through Acharyas, through Bhagavan, I will wrap up here. इत्येषा वाङ्मी पूजा श्रीमच्छङ्करपादयोरर्पिता तेन देवेश प्रीयतां मे सदाशिवः तव तत्त्वन्न जानामि कीदृशोऽसि महेश्वर ज्ञादृशोऽसि महादेव तादृशाय नमो नमः माता नृसिंहश्च पिता नृसिंहः भ्राता नृसिंहश्च सखा नृसिंहः विद्या नृसिंहो द्रविण नृसिंहः स्वामी नृसिंहः सकल नृसिंहः इतो नृसिंहः परतो नृसिंहः यतो यतो यामि ततो नृसिंहः बहिर्नृसिंहो हृदये नृसिंहः नृसिंहमादिमः